Can you hear him? They are giving you thumbs up.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, marhaban kum fil yawm al-aqal. Welcome at the EU Transport Day here in COP28 in Dubai. We're very happy to host you here at the second panel of the day. After a first one that was addressing the issue of climate resilience, the second one is navigating the future, boosting sustainable alternative fuels in shipping, and I'm sure that it will even be more interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, you have headphones on your seats. If the neighboring one is getting too loud, please use them for even a better experience. And I also would like to remind you what we said at the beginning of the day, that there will be a reception as of 19 o'clock if you would like also to see the participants and those who were here inside during the day and the other panels that were held here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the fireside chat that will be held now first here between Bruno Carvalho Arruda, the Deputy Head for Climate Action from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, and Magda Kopczynska, my Director General of DG Move, and they will then guide you also, and she will guide you further into the panel that will be held afterwards. I wish you a very good second panel of the day. Thank you, Magda. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you. I wish I could repeat Harold's address in other languages than English, but I will just stay with English so that I don't say the wrong thing. But thank you so much for joining us. And indeed, for this panel, for the next hour and a half, there were different things that we considered doing. But then I thought that since shipping is storming so much into the conversations in COP, and one of the reasons why shipping is storming into those conversations is that for those of you who would think back a couple of COPs in the past, and I'm thinking here in particular COP26 in Glasgow, there were pretty strong calls upon the sector by the Secretary General of the UN saying shipping has to do more. That was 2 years ago. Now we are in 2023, and quite a few things happened when it comes to shipping, including at the regulatory level, including at the International Maritime Organization. And that's why this fireside chat, well, we'll talk about IMO later as well, of course, but I thought you're in for a ride of a sail with Bruno, because many people who have been in the back offices and back corridors and back the rooms and back the halls of the IMO discussions did say to me that without Bruno, personal engagement and involvement, it is quite possible that the outcome of latest Marine Environment Protection Committee in July at the IMO wouldn't have been so positive. But before we go to those positive results, Bruno, you're speaking here maybe not so much for the IMO community, I won't ask for that, you're speaking here also and first and foremost for Brazil. If there are people in the room and listening to us who wouldn't know why it takes so much time and why it is so complicated for shipping to actually go on this decarbonization journey, why is shipping different from other sectors?
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you, the European Commission, for having me here. For me, it's a pleasure and an honor in talking about this work. That was actually the work of a very good bunch of people, European Commission included. We were guided in the right direction by our leader. I'm looking at Mr. Zwijnengaaf-Todal. So, but thank you very much for the question and the introduction. So I think that shipping is a very particular sector because, well, it involves so many conflicting interests, right? Mm-hmm. When you're talking about a transition in shipping, you're talking about the effects that this transition may have in shipbuilders, in fuel producers. You're talking about trade. You're talking about transportation in general. And whatever measures you adopt may have different effects. And so striking the right balance between the ambition that we all wanted, ultimately, and what's possible without disrupting all these elements was the task at hand.
Okay, but in 2018, the IMO adopted the initial strategy to talking about 50% reduction by 2050. We are really just 5 years later, and the level of IMO and the level of ambition and the practicality and the detailed level of what is in the revised strategy is so different. What happened in those 5 years? 5 years that have been not easy for anybody.
Right. Well, I think that multiple things have happened. I think that being the first strategy was a lot of pressure for the under the 2018 negotiators. So I think that cautious was, let's say, the preferred approach. 5 years later, I think countries were able to take the first version of the strategy back home and see how they could adjust to it and what would be the main points that would cause concern. So they would come. They knew, of course, that the strategy would be revised. So they had time to prepare and to adequately assess how far they could go under what conditions. I think that's what's happened in the
And
end.
that's why the deal was possible in July.
That's what I believe. Yes.
But I mean, speaking from a perspective of the EU, we have a rather robust framework to push shipping or the more widely maritime sector in the direction of going towards decarbonization, carbon neutrality, depends whom you're asking. But one of the challenges, of course, when we look at the IMO is that we speak to all countries worldwide with very different policy priorities, but also with very different financial capacities. And sometimes we hear back that that it just doesn't add up, that it's too expensive. But then from your perspective, from the perspective of a country that also has been very thoroughly analyzing where you stand when it comes to decarbonization in general, but also supporting decarbonization agenda of the IMO. Two questions. Is there a business case for sustainable fuels in shipping? And second, if yes, then how does this business case translate into Brazil outlook for what the country will be doing between now and 2030, 2040, when it comes to decarbonization of shipping? And if you want to go beyond ships, if you want to look at the wider ecosystem of shipping, please do so.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think there is, of course, a business case. I think whenever we talk about a transition, immediately you think, of course, challenges, but also very clear opportunities, right? And I think that that's what we intended to do with this strategy. Firstly, to set the right signals to all the stakeholders involved so that they knew where these opportunities would be, where the business opportunities would be. And also, I think that we tried, and that's what we are still doing in the IMO, is to provide the proper incentives for this transition to happen and for this business to become more viable and quickly more viable, right? So, and that's why I think it's important that we, now it's still a very important phase of the work. Firstly, we assigned the goals, the vision, we know where we want to get to, but now we have to have a better idea on how we are getting there and what are these incentives. And that's why I think that you asked about not just the business case, but also what's at stake for countries like Brazil. I think that we have to be very, very careful now so as to design the right incentives. What we want to do is to push the transition in fuels, incentivize new technologies that, for example, wind propulsion, when we talk about big rudder sails for heavy ships. So we want to incentivize those. We want to, but we do not want to create an impossible situation that will, let's say, collapse, create a shock in shipping, international shipping, that would have a very negative impact, especially for countries that depend on shipping in their international trade. We don't want this transition to become, let's say, a punishment for countries that are located far apart from their most dynamic partners, so to speak. So that's why we need to be careful when designing these measures. I think when they're done, we're going to have a much clearer idea on where the opportunities are. But clearly, we already know that, of course, sustainable fuels is going to grow. We still need a more, let's say, to see more specifically what are the pathways, the technological pathways available. And in the meantime, it's very important that we don't close any doors, and that's the Brazilian approach. So what we're doing internally is we're trying to incentivize fuel, all alternative fuels that we envisage. I mean, research in every area. Biofuels, we're talking hydrogen, of course, and ammonia, certain types of ammonia, depending on how it's produced. and all the other possibilities at hand. So I think that these two business cases are very, very close to us now. Research and development of sustainable fuels, of course, and alternative technologies for propulsion that will be adapted and adjusted to the strategy.
Well, thank you. You mentioned the need to create the right type of incentives at the international level. What are these, or what are the wrong type of incentives?
That's a million-dollar question. I think
Yeah.
that that's what we're going to discuss. We've launched the comprehensive impact assessment on the negative impacts of potential measures to be adopted, and this is work underway. Ideally, and I'd say conceptually, because I don't want to touch into the exact measures being discussed, we've already agreed that we need a technical measure that will, let's say, establish a threshold, which will point to the fuel, let's say, uptake and the speed of the decarbonization in fuels, correct?
So that's basically the measure that will call for alternative fuels in shipping.
That's right.
Alternative energies, whatever will be the final name of that measure. Just for, in case there's anybody in this room who doesn't know the nitty-gritty of the IMO strategy.
Exactly. I'm sorry if I get too specific
I mean, I'm
sometimes.
fine, but just,
But just also for people that don't know yet the strategy, there's this, the ultimate vision is to achieve net zero by around 2050. So that's the final, let's say the finish line. And we have already established an indicative trajectory. So in order to do that, what sort of measures do we need? Then, so we need this technical measure that will say, so fuel has to be progressively free from carbon, but considering on a life cycle basis. So you're considering from all the way from production to its expenditure. That's one thing, but we also need the economic incentives to allow for this, for the uptake of this fuel, meaning that we have to, let's say, create benefits for first movers and create situations in which the last movers or the ships that have more difficulty in adapting,
less developed
countries, we have to create the opportunity for them to comply, but in a more phased way. So in our understanding, to set this configuration of elements would be the goal of the next phase.
So now a question, we have 5 minutes left according to this nice clock that is here, so I will ask whether there is anybody here who'd like to ask the question, but before doing that, so if you were to bet, will those two measures be in place by 2025? Sort of agreed, not implemented, but at least agreed? Sveinung is smiling. We'll ask him the question when we start the panel. So,
will they be in place?
Well, will there be an agreement as to the details of those measures at the IMO level?
It's very hard to bet.
We will not hold you against this answer. Don't worry, you can say anything.
Well, if I had to bet, then you'd be my money, right? No,
no.
But I'm kidding.
No money back here. No, sorry.
Right. But look, it's important to say that we agree that before adopting any measures, we are going to assess and address the negative impacts on countries. So I don't want to put the cart in front of the oxen and say when we're going to be able to adopt the measures. We have an agreed framework, and I think all countries intend to work within that framework, and that points to the selection of these measures by 2025. So we're hoping, I mean, is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. We're just going to have to work a lot and make sure that we are thorough and that we don't create any undesirable noise in the process. Hopefully with the help of the other stakeholders, the industry, the NGOs and civil society in all the countries, maybe we can even refine this process. It's our goal, we're going to stick to it. So if I had to bet, then yes, provided that we do our homework.
Yes, I think the point about doing homework has been something that really came forward a lot between 2018 and 2023. As you were saying, there was a lot of homework done by many actors in this big discussion on where shipping should go, at the level of countries, at the level of the EU, at the level of the industry, and also I'd say, I think we at the EU level, we really appreciate a strong statement and support given by the IMO as organization to actually move in that direction. That was very positive and made things easier. 3.5 minutes. Anybody that would like to ask a question to Bruno? Yes. You will get a mic.
Thank you so much. This was a fabulous discussion. I wanted to ask about...
Could you please make sure that you introduce yourself
Sure.
for those who don't know you?
Sure. My name's Jacob Walentz. I work in the shipping industry. So I wanted to ask specifically about the CII in regard to the IMO update in July. Just wanted to pick your brain a bit about if this is a bit paradoxical in terms of making maybe making vessels go out a bit longer to, kind of have less intensity. I'm just a bit learning a bit more about how the CII metric can perhaps be improved. Thank you.
Bruno, you're welcome to answer, but I can see at least 2 people on the next panel that will jump on answering that question as well. But please go ahead. That's going to be the soft transition to the panel, but please go ahead.
All right.
I'm
So
not answering.
briefly speaking, firstly, there is one of the goals, so to speak, in the vision establishes also a transition in terms of carbon intensity, which is what the CII addresses, correct? And our revised strategy also has one paragraph, as you may recall, that establishes that we will have to look for synergies between the existing measures adopted by the IMO and the new measures to be adopted in pursuing the strategy. So we are very, very aware that we have already worked on the CII and those, let's say, that amount, the information that the CII generates, and we intend to use that to potentialize the new measures to be adopted. So it's not going to be thrown away. Ideally, we are already working on it to find a way to plug the CII requirements in this new pack of measures. Very briefly responding, because I'm sure the next panel is going to dive into it.
I'm sure they will. Any more questions? Not really. So I was just thinking, maybe just to finish off, even though your answer to my question about those specific measures being or not being in place in time was a bit of a summary discussion. But bringing back again the Brazil perspective, so what are the key things that Brazil will now be doing when it comes to preparing for the decarbonization of shipping?
Look, I think that we are going to have this agreed impact assessment, and Brazil will be doing its own impact assessments, of course, because we need more granularity when it comes to assessing, the transition on our side. So that's one thing that we will be paying very close attention to, is the impact of all the measures that are being considered on Brazilian economy in general. Again, what happens to Brazil, it's not so particular that it won't happen to other developing countries. So it's a very, very big concern. We would not like measures to become, to be regressive types of measures that would, let's say, increase the gap between countries and regions. We want to avoid that at all costs, and we count on the understanding and the partnership of all the countries involved in this exercise to help us do so. I don't think it's anybody's goal to let that happen. So that's our first concern. But we are also looking from the, let's say, the business side opportunity, of course. As you know, Brazil is a big renewable energy country. So we have conditions to produce and provide for a big part of the fuel to be uptaken. So we are also speeding up the internal incentives to the production of that sort of fuels.
One of the things that comes in many of my meetings with countries worldwide, very much outside the EU, is indeed looking at the opportunity that production of sustainable fuels for shipping, but also partially for aviation, can bring to the economies, and changing this sort of paradigm as to which countries are the sources of energy. When we look at renewable fuels or fuels produced with renewable energies, clearly countries that have never been net producers of energy are embarking on that path. And I understand that this is also a big part of the strategy of Brazil, not only for shipping, but in general.
Of Brazil's vision, we have the opportunity of allowing countries to be a part of this supply chain of which they've never been a part of before. So we can actually use this moment, this transition that is been a man-made transition, so to speak, because it's been incentivized by artificial incentives because it's so urgent, you know, to the climate urgency it requires. So we have this opportunity in very much in line with the Build Back Better approach after COVID-19. Let's try to do something different now. Let's try to include more countries, more people. Let's try to address other issues that we can while decarbonizing shipping. I think that that's our approach in general.
Bruno, I think it's a perfect summary of this conversation. Thank you so much for joining for this fire chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for the audience, in an ideal world, you don't move anywhere. We take 3-minute technical break. When things have happened to here, additional chairs have to come, mics have to be reconnected. So you just do your tweets, do your texts, do your mails, and bear with us. Thank you.
Stick around. You don't want to miss Mr. Aftadal. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If I can now ask you to stop the conversations that you're having. Thank you so much. The panel is here. I just, again, I strongly recommend you put on headphones and then you really hear exactly what we are saying. It's just, if you've been to other meetings in COP, this is basically how it works. There are more than one event happening very close to each other. Let me start by introducing the panel. They are there in the program, but you may not see their names, so I will just do it, well, maybe in the order that they sit, so, and I think you know most of them, but still. Isabel Rigbus, Secretary General of the European Seaports Organization. Next to her, Afke van Rijn, Vice Minister for the Environment in the Netherlands. Then Sveinung Oftedal. Sveinung, you have the longest title. Chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Reduction of Greenhouse Gas Emissions from Ships, Ministry of Climate and Environment, Norway, but basically Mr. IMO deal guy, in case anybody wouldn't know. Then we have Alexander Feint, almost as long a title, Chair of Roundtable 3 of the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuels Value Chain Industrial Alliance, and Head of New Energy, right? That's Alexander. And last but not least, Morten Bo Christensen, Senior Vice President and Head of Energy Transition in Maersk. The idea of that panel is to try to recreate a bit of a fireside chat. I know that Harald did very well. I've never had a fireside chat with 5 people. To make it easier for me, they can't all speak at once because we only have 2 mics, and only one of those mics will be on at any given time. So that's a bit easier. That's a bit easier for me to manage. But I have a couple of questions. Knowing the panel, I'm pretty sure that very soon they will engage in a conversation between themselves, which I will not interrupt unless it gets outside the scope of this panel. And of course, we will be happy to hear questions from you. There was also to be a possibility of questions from Slido, but here I'm in the capable hands of my team. If there are questions coming in Slido, they will wave, and then we'll go ahead with that. But then looking at the, one more comment. When you look at the composition of the panel, you will know that this panel is about shipping, but shipping going broader. Because we have ports, that's why Isabel is here, because we have the important elements of the production and push for uptake of alternative fuels, that's why Alexander is here. And then, of course, we have the very important regulatory angle, that's why we have Afke here. Sveinung will say whatever Sveinung wants to say. And then we'll, of course, also ask you how shipping industry is doing and what shipping industry is doing or what can it do better. Then maybe I will actually start with the government side, and I've got a question to you from a national perspective, but also from a perspective of a country that is member of the EU, and of course member of the IMO. What can governments, are the governments doing the right thing? Is the Dutch government doing the right thing? Of course it is. But what can governments do more to make sure that shipping at large, that means ships, ports, the entire fuel ecosystem, are moving in the right direction and at the right speed?
It's a broad question.
We have
what can
1 hour.
governments do?
So
No, I'll try to start with an answer, but further we'll get into the discussion later on. Let me first thank you, Mr. Afterdal, and the IMO Secretary for their excellent work for making the agreement on an ambitious IMO greenhouse gas strategy possible this summer. And we as the Netherlands, we welcome very much the ambition in the strategy, and especially because it's a great combination of pricing and regulation, and you need it to start the transition to sustainable fuels in the most cost-effective ways and keeping impact as low as possible. And also a transition that is inclusive and just as you just had in your conversation, and with strict timelines for the agreement. Because you ask, what can you do as government? And as a government, I think for us, as in the Netherlands, we say it's always very important to combine pricing and setting norms, because it gives an impulse and it goes hand by hand. And a second thing is, as a government, I mean, you can do a lot also I mean, it's all about cooperation. Cooperation with the stakeholders, with companies, with industries, with ports. And I think you can help as a government a lot in that respect as well. And also, of course, but then that's why I said it's quite a broad question. I mean, we don't know yet what will be the portfolio in sustainable fuels. And that's also something as a government you have to take into account and to work on.
Thank you. I actually wanted now to jump a bit on what you were just saying in terms of a question about the fuels, but maybe before I do that, and taking advantage of the fact that Sveinung is sitting next to you, I will actually read out, Sveinung, to you a question that literally now came in Slido. And the question is the following. The revised IMO greenhouse gas strategy is not sufficient. How to ensure an adequate global fuel standard and CO2 tax/levy? Without them, there is no investment.
Now, that's a very good question, and luckily also we have industry here which can inform us about what do they need to invest. Now, I think the key part in order to make an investment for the future is that you are certain that you have a return in your investment. We should never forget that the companies, they have shareholder, they want a return on their investment. In order to get that, they need certainty. Certainty that what we have promised shall happen, will happen. And then, of course, when it comes to then the delivery of the IMO, we have been very clear on that this shall happen and that we will have a timely follow-up, meaning, as you said in the first fireside chat, that by the autumn of 2025, we are ready to adopt a measure. Now, then there is a lot of discussion on the recipe. What type of recipe? The public in general, they have like this. Okay, thank you. The public in general have an opinion. The industry have an opinion. What is the best recipe? Now, in July, we also agreed on the recipe, meaning the recipe shall deliver on the ambitions. And there are many recipes which can actually deliver on the ambitions. And therefore, the most important thing is that we make this brilliant combination, so actually the chefs at the kitchen, meaning the industry, can make the food to the public in general, so they can be served. Meaning that this combination of a technical requirement, which is then we have pointed towards the fuels. We all know that on energy efficiency, you can make perhaps 30% or 40% further improvement, but then it stops. You need to go into the fuel. And in order for Maersk and others to invest in the fuel transition, okay, they say they need a levy. Well, that is not certain it will come. Maybe then you will have a technical, let's say, a legal requirement. Maybe that will come. But my main message is that we have promised to deliver. We shall deliver. So you have the trust for your investment. I think that was a kind of clear, but also a kind of broad answer, because it's not my role to dictate now what the member states shall agree to.
Okay, thank you. We will be talking a lot about the fuels, but maybe I will start from the other angle of the fuels. Isabel, from the perspective of ports, in particular European ports, but maybe ports at large, the decision of the IMO in July, good, not good, very good, excellent. Second, from the perspective of ports, what is needed so that this side of the equation, when it comes to pushing for sustainable alternative fuels in shipping, what is needed for that to happen? And please don't start with money.
Let's start with money then. No, good morning and thank you for this invitation. I think what has been agreed in IMO is an important step. It's a target, I mean, and you said it, Minister, we will do it, it will work, but now the measures have to be there. I mean, the measures or the way, I mean measures, I mean either an instrument, either And this is, I think, because only the target, I mean, is maybe not enough, because it's a target that is not enforceable, if I understand well, at the international level, whereas at European level, we have with the Fit for 55 quite a strict framework. So it will be very tricky to what you said, and the return on investment. You have to be sure what you do, that at some point it will deliver, certainly in reduction of emissions. This is the most important, I think this is the most important KPI in a way, delivering on emission reduction. But on the other hand, you also have to finance it. I'm sorry to say so, but it is like that. And there, the whole greening of shipping is something where you have a lot of capex and a lot of capex on the land side. And the land side are the ports. And so there we have to see, because this is capex where you do not have, it's more risky investments. And we do not know where you will, what will be the solution that will work. It will be a combination of solutions, and that's why it's very important. We have now a framework at EU level to, and before the Brazilian minister said, we cannot close doors. I would say you cannot only open one door. I mean, we really have to help different solutions at the same time. And that is probably this angle about, because you want only some solutions to, you want to work in a network perspective, because if everyone is doing something else, it doesn't work. And I think therefore we need, next to the legislative framework, a lot of bottom-up work, a lot of dialogue. I see the green corridors as a very good instrument to build up this trust. And that is my final point. I think what we need is trust. And trust, not that we need it, but to get the investments. I think the worst thing is to have a start and stop system. I mean, you boost something and a few years after you say, I know, no, that's not the way we should do it. So that, I think it's very important.
But thank you for your answer, and in particular this final comment about the need for regulatory predictability is something that, from the EU perspective, is one of the key elements. You mentioned Fit for 55, the package of proposals addressing maritime, again, I'm overusing the word ecosystem, but please give me a better one, I still haven't found one. It's the Fuel EU Maritime, asking for fuels. It's the emission trading scheme for shipping, putting price on carbon. It's alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, making sure that alternative fuels also in shipping are there on the port side. It's the innovation fund, funded from ETS, which should offer money for innovative projects, including in shipping, plus some other measures, including financing. And for that, of course, the two measures that Sveinung mentioned when it comes to the IMO, a technical measure, fuel-related, and a carbon pricing measure, whichever the ultimate form is from the EU perspective, it's a good mix and a good combination to put in place. Will we be able to deliver both? We, as the IMO community, future will tell, but let's see. But now we were talking, we are talking about fuels, we are talking about regulatory predictability. So two different questions to representatives of sort of two angles of the industry. We'll start with ships. Maersk has been doing a lot, and I don't know more than, I mean, don't tell us everything that Maersk has been doing, but maybe a bit a similar question that Isabel got from me, how important / positive is the decision at the IMO? And second, what happened a couple of days here in COP, not all of us were here, if you could tell us more what happened and why it's important or not important.
Wow, I think I can use the full hour for that question, but I'll try and limit myself. I know. I think if we start with how important is what was achieved at the IMO, I know, is there a category above excellent? Like outstanding, or I think it is absolutely, it's a historic moment, and it is really, we now actually have a framework that can actually properly solve the problem for the industry as the only hard-to-abate sector here. So I don't think we can overestimate the importance of what has been achieved, nor of the work that that lies ahead, and Sveinung described that extremely well. I think what we also are seeing in shipping is actually that the industry actually feels an obligation to do something and be part of something. We all know that we are part of the problem here. We account for 2 to 3% of emissions. We all acknowledge the important role we play. Shipping is the lifeline of many countries. I think actually I speak on behalf of the industry when I say that we actually feel a strong responsibility to do something about the problem. I of course know my own company best, and we have talked about this for a while, and the reason we started to order ships that can sail on the green fuels, why we have set a very ambitious target of net zero in 2040, is really to pressure ourselves to live up to that responsibility. But if you look across certainly our container peers, most of them actually also have quite ambitious targets. And what the event we had on Friday, where you saw 5 shipping CEOs standing together who don't normally take pictures together, was really that we have agreed that some things are just too important to be sort of to compete on, and the nitty-gritty of fighting each other in the market. And this is just one of them. We should not use our energy on competing with each other. We should use our energy on how we can actually best support the IMO in the extremely important work that is coming next year. Because I think what we need to realize is that we can talk about green corridors and we can talk about all kinds of things, but without green fuels, there will be no green corridors, there will be no green ships. And those green fuels for a foreseeable future will just be significantly more important than the fossil alternative. And there is actually a case for that today. We actually have a product, and others have that as well, which is actually selling quite well for a certain group of customers who wants to do the right thing and who wants to pay a green premium. And we are very happy about that. We are proud of our customers. But that is going to hit a wall at some point, because we cannot get the entire shipping sector along on that. It can get us started, and that's great. But we do need a successful outcome of the next year's work for this to take off. So, and yes, we have our opinion in the industry about how to do that. We will formulate that and make it clear. And we do prefer some kind of pricing mechanism that can level the playing field. We call it a green balance fee. I won't go into any details, but these mechanisms work, and we can actually see it with the EU. The ETS that we will now be part of in the future. It's not global, so it's not ideal, but it's definitely better than nothing, and it works. In Europe, you're basically halving the price point for the green product with the ETS. When you halve the price point of your product, demand goes up. And also the Fuels EU mandate, it works, right? Shipping lines are sitting to figure out how can I meet that, because it's going to be too expensive not to. So we just know it works. And we now have the opportunity to get something in place. And then we promise to cook some really good food for the customers in the restaurant.
Thank you so much. And a great intro to my next question to Alexander. Just for those here and watching us who don't know what the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuels Alliance is, it's an entity. Entity is probably the right word to describe it, which the Commission put in place, especially focusing on shipping and aviation, to make sure that all those relevant stakeholders are in the same place at the same time, same place physically, but sometimes even more importantly, intellectually, to discuss what needs to happen to boost up the production of those sustainable fuels. Because it's very good, more than what you're saying, you know, Maersk is working, Maersk is you have your vision, you will have your ways of looking for and finding alternative fuels. But the whole idea is that at some point, low carbon alternative fuels will be as available or even more available than fossil fuels are based today. And to have that happen requires a lot. Regulatory framework is a must. Goodwill of owners of shipping companies is second. But there are many elements that have to fall into place for this whole, I hate the word ecosystem of sustainable fuels falls into place. So, Alexander, I mean, what from your perspective is still missing, or maybe nothing is missing, maybe it's just a matter of time for all those fuels to happen, and also how you see the interest, the push for the production of such fuels picking up or not?
All right, thanks for that very...
And you don't have 40 minutes, no.
I do understand. Thanks for that very easy question. So you've described the work of the RLCF Alliance pretty well. So basically, all of the value chain is represented there. So we have ports, we have shipping companies, regulators, technology providers. So that means all those views, all those pain points, all those wishes and wet dreams are assembled in that alliance. Yeah? So what is missing was your question. I think on the one hand, there is a bit of regulation, so I don't think that, or we don't think that a CO2 price alone is going to cut it. You probably will need mandates and quotas because shipping is a volume business and not a margin business. So anybody who wants to sell a molecule into shipping is not going to do it because shipping is the highest margin business. Yeah? So they all look at it as an outlet, but we need incentives or rules that they actually will end up in shipping. And that also means we do need to ensure that the resources and the production capacities are being scaled up. Yeah? So we are talking about, is there enough CO2 available? Is there enough renewable energy available? Do we have the hardware, the electrolyzers that turn the energy into hydrogen and then into power-to-X fuels? All those questions are being discussed within the RCF Alliance. We need to enable the players of the value chain to find each other, and that's why we are working on some kind of matchmaking platform where we actually try to lock in the projects that are being discussed, not being built, not being FID'd, but being discussed with the potential demand. Yeah? So there will be a platform facilitated by the European Union where those two sides, offtake and production, are supposed to meet. We do not feel that technology will be a bottleneck, so just maybe to make that statement clear, for the decarbonization of shipping, technology will not be the showstopper. Yeah? So the things are in place, are being worked on. That is not an issue, but we do feel on the production, on the regulation side, and on the finding each other side, there's some work to do. And then there are some more nitty-gritty work streams where we look at the specific details. So for example, how is certification handled? Yeah? So what is actually green, blue, and gray if I start blending methanol, which is the same chemical, but has a different origin? Yeah? And how is that being facilitated in a bunker delivery node? So there's a dedicated work stream on that, working with the European Sustainable Shipping Forum on that. So there are a few things where we really need to look at the details, which leaves us enough room to keep on working in the RLCF Alliance, to just put it this way. If I may, maybe just to add, we've been discussing, not in detail, but we've discussing sustainable fuels. One thing that we need to maybe also put a focus on is also the existing fleet. So when we talk about retrofits, when we talk about efficiency gains, companies like mine, we are active in improving the efficiency of vessels. So it's not always the new, I don't know, hydrogen, ammonia engine. It's also all the vessels that are out there, yeah? And that's why retrofits will play a role in making those fuel available. Maybe blue in the beginning, maybe bio in the beginning, but in the end, synthetic or green.
Okay. Thank you. Just for everybody, I sort of did agree that if the panel members want to ask questions to one another, they are allowed. Here comes one. Or comments.
Yeah, it's more, if you will, a practical comment to what Eric said, and acknowledge all the great work that you're doing, and it's super important. And there are many challenges that needs to be solved. I think also, if you think of it as a very practical approach, if you want to buy some oil for a ship today, it's quite easy. You call a trader or you call an oil company, and here comes a bunker barge, and you pay the bill, and off you go. If you would want to buy some green methanol or green ammonia or even biodiesel, that's not really that easy because there's not an established market. So the fuels are not available to most companies because there's nobody who aggregates demand, who does the development of the projects on speculation as we have today with the oil companies. That's the business model, right? They do exploration, they find oil, they pump it up, and they sell it. And until we get there and get a fluid market, this is going to be difficult. And what is needed there is demand. Because no project gets FID'd if you don't have a sales contract for your volume, because then you cannot get any financing, or the financing you get will be very expensive, and then the fuel will be way too expensive. So it's this thing about what does it take. If we can get demand, the rest will follow, would be my sort of a little bit extreme perspective here. And in order to get demand, you need a business case that comes together. And I think, again, Sveinung mentioned that you need certainty about what's coming, and you need to see a way where you can get your cost covered, one way or the other. And that's really what we need. So again, that's why I keep stressing it, the importance of getting this IMO strategy implemented in a good and effective way. That will solve not all, but a lot of our problems.
There's a lot of head nodding among the panel members, which suggests, well, they agree, but maybe they want to add. Alexander, Afke?
Maybe a bit of a self-critical point. So, over my years within shipping, I've always heard this phrase of, I need to find, from a ship owner perspective, I need to know exactly what's coming, everything needs to be in place and basically be pre-digested before I start moving. I have a slightly different opinion. I think being an entrepreneur means taking decisions with incomplete information and also entrepreneurial risk. So I also feel we need to start acting. So, and not everybody is Maersk. So not everybody has the financial firepower to do what you've been doing. So there's a whole lot of people out there who have different choices and options. But I think if we are serious as an industry to decarbonize, to green, then we need to become active, even though not everything is in place yet. And that's, I mean, I believe this is an opportunity. If you are one of the first movers, and your vessels will live 24, 25, 30 years, and you will not be hit by some funny regulation in 15 years' time because you've made a decision 15 years back. This is, I think, in my view, an opportunity, but I think we also, as an industry, need to be a bit less conservative and a bit more risk, have a little bit more risk appetite. So that's also maybe some comment.
Okay. I think we can have a long discussion about the risk appetite in shipping. I think if you look at the historic results to indicate that there's quite a lot of that. I actually also think if you look at the money invested in the industry up until now, and I can speak for myself. Yes, we ordered ships. 2 weeks ago, we signed up 500,000 tons of green methanol, but a lot of our competitors have also ordered ships, where several $1 billion of additional capex has gone in without any kind of certainty of getting return on that investment. So I accept your challenge. I think it's not entirely fair, but I do accept it. And certainly also I sympathize with the fact that there are a lot of smaller ship owners who doesn't even have a balance sheet that you can bank a project on. But that's, again, honestly, I'm just coming back to this again and again. If you have certainty, if you know that shipping lines will be able to recoup the cost, someone is going to put up those balance sheets, because then it's a business. There's enough projects out there. We know, we have talked to hundreds of developers. There is enough projects. All this talk about there will not be enough fuel. If we get the right framework in place, there will be enough fuel. There's a lot of money that wants to invest in this. So we have all, most of the stars are aligning. We are missing one, and that will then, I think, also solve the problem for the smaller. That being said, I also think it's fair that the largest companies with the largest balance sheet actually move first and take most of the risk. But I would actually argue that is, at least to some extent, happening, and not just with my company, but actually across the industry. But it's a great point.
You've done a brilliant thing to inspire the rest of the panel. Afke, Isabel, Sveinung, please, comments?
Okay, I'll start, but I think the rest as well also wants to say. I mean, shipping is a global sector, and it's great to hear you talking like this. I mean, I hear there are a lot of ambition, and that's great. And I'd like to add maybe first, trust. I understand trust and certainty. I mean, long-term signals are essential to the sector. And before you invest, you want to know what way the legislation is going. So that's something we support fully. And I think when we look at both the levy and the global fuel standards, we think it's a win-win. With the levy, you can stimulate sustainable shipping, sustainability in the broader sense, so also sustainability in ports. And on the other hand, it incentivizes production and demand of the sustainable fuels. So I think looking together at the win-wins and look how we can get the global shipping center, global sector, which demands global measures, and that demands global cooperation, and let's just really work at that system with all of us.
Isabel, then Svein. So,
yes, yes. I just wanted to say that I agree. We need this strategy. I mean, a big step have been made with the decision and IMO, but we need the measures, we need the strategy, and I think a levy or a price mechanism is the best tool, because now we have the ETS at the EU, or we will have, and we say it works. We don't know yet. I mean, it starts in January, and since it's not global, I mean, we have to see. We see some risks of rerouting and escaping the mechanism. So there, I think it's very important to develop it at global level, and then to say, you know, we don't want to run the risk. I mean, I think we all run a risk, and the only way of limiting the risk, also from a port side of stranded assets and so on, is to talk. And we always say walk the talk, but we should talk during the walk. I think, you know, during this journey, really, because it's really at the individual port and customer level to talk and to see what is going on, how to prepare, how to be efficient, because it's big budgets, big investments for ports, probably a lot of investments without or with a very slow and low return on investment sometimes. So better invest it in things that will be used. So there, I think this dialogue is essential. So I would really plead for continuing this dialogue and so limiting the risk for everyone. I mean, because everyone will run a risk, and there is a level to which you can accept the risk, but you can't put the risk on one party and not on all.
Yes. Now, if I may add an element, because now we're here at COP28. And I have, let's say, communicated at home, in my view, what we achieved at the IMO and what we will ensure in the follow-up is so far the climate deal of this decade. And I hope it serves as an inspiration to the COP delegates. And let me spend a couple of minutes to explain why. First of all, this is an agreement between the same member states which are here. And we all know when it comes to the various circumstances in member states, it is quite different, and shipping is global, and we have agreed on one direction for a global sector, and we are meeting the same type of challenges, actually, which they are meeting here in their efforts to reduce emissions. So let it be an inspiration. And of course, we can also explain how we achieved it. The example of, let's say, Northern Europe, which I can provide, is, you know, it's good to communicate, but I said to my minister, now, here's this ammonia ship, we're gonna, let's say, be in operation in Norway, or hydrogen ship, put that in the port of a developing country, and let's say, okay, do you think it will go fine? They will need to do the same type of a job we are doing now at our country to make it function. So we need to have respect for that. The other element, which I think is of utmost important, we have taken responsibility for our sector. In addition, we have said, hey, we don't want to impose further emission increase in the other sector, meaning the fuel production. You know, I think that is a great example, let's say, how we, in a holistic approach, will reduce our emission. The other thing, which is extremely important, when I started working with shipping, I think the bunker price was $50 a ton. You know, it's residual oil. Residual oil is at the end of the refinery process. Nobody else want to have it. Shipping can digest it and burn it, make it into energy to fuel the ship. Now we are at a completely different end, meaning we are part of defining the energy transition. We are a part of the transportation. Hey, this is the transportation day, but we, as a sector, is now moving forward. We want to define the energy transition. We want to set the agenda. We want to create a signal to the energy transition, the fuel production. And that is an extremely complex task. And I'm soon going to end. Then, not everybody here has the full overview how shipping is organized. Me neither. And I guess you don't have the full overview because it's so complex. It's so many business models. So in order to have this, you said ecosystem, I will not use it, this complex society or business model to function in a global transition is not that straightforward. So therefore, I say what we have done serves as an inspiration and example for this meeting, and what we will do in our follow-up, and also the industry preparation will, I think, be an example to follow. And the final element, we are prepared from our side, meaning Norway, also to assist developing countries so they can ensure their transition. Now, one final element. We are often talking about the first movers. I'm more concerned about, let's say, the bulk on the last movers, because there you will have the real challenges when it comes to the safety risk. The first movers, there's high quality of the end. I'm not nervous about that. I'm nervous when the major volumes are coming in, when all the seafarers need to operate all these ships, when all the ports need to serve all these kind of fuels, that we need to do this in a safe manner. So there are so many challenges, and I hope, again, I'm proud of what we have done. I'm certain that we can also be proud of our follow-up, because we reached our agreement with consensus. With consensus, that is also the fundamental basis for a successful follow-up. Okay, enough for me for a while.
Thank you, Svein, and thank you indeed for making this link between the MEPC discussions in the IMO and now COP, because you made me realize that on so many occasions previously, I was saying to the IMO community, look at COP, they are much more advanced than the shipping, and well, let's see how long it stays. I have something like 15 questions in Slido, but before I turn there, I will ask whether there's anybody in the room who would like to ask questions. No, everybody's overwhelmed with the panel. The questions in Slido are of different nature, but maybe sort of one. I know we are here to talk about sustainable alternative fuels in shipping, but there's a whole group of questions, say, aiming at asking all of you whether fuels are everything, whether there are other things that shipping can do, and if there are, what they are, and then how to get there. And I think one caveat with that question, coming back to this legal certainty and predictability, that was a big question we had on the EU side when the Fit for 55 package was being prepared. What do we do to talk about the future without prescribing the future when we don't know yet what to prescribe? Hence the sort of technology-neutral approach in Fuel EU Maritime without pointing to specific fuel. I had long discussions with Isabel and her crowd how easy it would be if we could go and say to all EU ports, from 2030 you go for fuel X. But this will not happen. And if we wait for this magic solution to come, then we don't do anything, then we don't take the risk. Because I think there's also, Alexander, a risk on the regulatory side. Coming up with a proposal that leaves certain things open and allows the market to catch up with the requirements of the regulation is a pretty challenging thing to put there, because I hope it will deliver. But now, coming back to my question, what are the other elements that can be put in for shipping? There are at least two questions about green corridors. Are there a way forward? I think especially Afka and Morten, both the Netherlands, but also Maersk is involved. Some of European ports are really embarking on this green corridor concept that was born somewhere in the COP corridors, I think 2 years ago in Glasgow. So maybe green corridors, a separate set of questions.
Let me start by the thing about, is there other to this? Is there more to this than just the green fuels? I think that's an excellent question. So whoever put it, thank you. Because the greenest fuel is the fuel you don't burn. So I think the whole, I think it was also mentioned previously that efficiencies, so basically, operating much more both at the vessel basic, on the network basic, all kinds of things, is extremely important. when we look at our roadmap towards 2030, where we have some specific target as well, sort of in very round numbers, half of the emissions that we will abate will be through green fuels, the other half will be through efficiencies. So it is, from an emissions perspective, just as important as green fuels, and it is actually a decarbonization lever that saves you money and doesn't cost you money. So, so I think it's a very, very important element. We should not be, we should talk a lot about green fuels, and we do, but we should certainly not forget about the efficiency levers. And there are many different things you can do. There's also interesting new technologies. Wind-assisted propulsion is beginning to look like something you can deploy even on a container ship, which is a bit difficult because there are containers everywhere. But again, lots of innovation, lots of developments. So it's very, very important that we don't forget about that, and that we also have a framework that actually incentivizes that. Because the thing is, you cannot actually commercialize an abatement from a shipping in today, from an efficiency measure in today's measure. So very, very important element as well. And then I think on the corridors, would someone else like to say a few words on that?
Maybe just another, yeah, I will, but another point, I think what's also relevant, aside of the efficiency part that I mentioned earlier, is handover points and the use. So when I mean handover points is ports and hinterland. Yeah, so is that being synchronized? Is that working how digitalization allows us, in theory, to have it working? So I think there is some efficiencies to be found in that area as well. On the green corridors, or there are other concepts like the clean energy hubs. Yeah, so instead of building highways through the ocean, having hubs in certain locations that serve more than one highway. Yeah, so to speak. I think, yes, everything that helps accelerating the decarbonization, and if for whatever reason the agreement, the global rules take a bit longer in IMO, then we just use those hubs or those green corridors to circumvent it or fast track that, however you want to put that. So yes, I mean, there are so many initiatives out there, so it's, in my view, a valid point, and also helps the producers to figure out where should they produce or where should they supply, and also the potential off-takers to figure out for what kind of trades this actually might play a role. Yeah? So it helps with the matchmaking initiative as well.
I think everybody on this, so I mean, you can go ahead.
Just a short comment on the green corridors and to explain why this is important. And back to the, let's say, way shipping is functioning. Some have a regular route, long-term contracts. Some sail in the spot market, can go to any port, with various cargoes. Now, in order to start the transition, you need to have focused action, meaning focused investment, focused action. You need to have the companies involved in providing the fuel and making it available in the port, and those operating to concentrate on, let's say, a starting point, which then can be a dedicated trade between two or more ports where there, let's say, regular port calls from some ships, meaning that then I think you will have a better, let's say, return over your investments. You can make it up and functioning, meaning paving the way then for other routes to come later on. So that is, what we are working with also from our side in Norway and the Nordic countries, and I'm very encouraged to see that it's going on in several of the various parts of the world, which is making me hopeful that the first move will really can make this function on zero emissions in those routes. You have a microphone.
Yes, I have my own. Let's start with the green corridors. I think when it's concerning cooperation between ports, it's very important as well. And then it's key to drive sustainability. So we need more and more port connections and that adequate supply of alternative fuels and charging infrastructure. So we can really create sustainable shipping. And for example, between London and Rotterdam, we have organized a green corridor. So I think that's great as well. And your other question about other fuels, I mean, efficiency or less shipping movements maybe, always key. But we also have great examples of electric ferries. Holland Shipyard, for example, has made an electric ferry that's being used in the Olympic Games in Paris. It's 3D printed, self-shipping, electric. So you need more and more innovations. And public-private cooperation there again is key. I think it's key for everything here.
I mean, Afke, you realize that saying a 3D printed autonomous electric ferry, and you just say it like that, like it's a given. If somebody said that 10 years ago, people would be asking which SF movie they have been watching, no?
It's great. I saw the pictures, but it's already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, if you ask what can you do beyond looking at the alternative fuels of the new fuels, I think what we should also see is the other side, ports and shipping as a solution. I mean, because we will have to transport also all these new fuels. So this is the other aspect as well, to prepare the fleet for transporting, to prepare the ports, because there is, oil has a lot of negative aspects, but there is one positive aspect of oil, or there was one, it's that it's easy. Easy for in a port. The new energies will need a lot of space, need a lot of safety perimeters, whatever. So you will need a lot of conversion, storage. You will need a lot of space, a lot more space in the ports, and this something that is very difficult in Europe to achieve. I mean, because most of the ports are in a lack of space. Also, space will mean creating additional space will mean acceptance. Acceptance also educate also the communities around that to go for this greening will mean additional infrastructure. Maybe other modes like pipelines will become a lot more important. So these are all also messages we have to convey, and we have to count also on the shipping sector to help us in these messages. I mean that we have to change this whole way of how a port will look like in the future.
But can I, because I saw both Sveinung and Morten asking for the floor, but I have like 3 questions here, a bit in the same direction, and they are mostly at you, Isabel, but also a bit at Sveinung. When we look at ports, ports are not regulated at the IMO. Question, should they?
No, no, I don't think the IMO should, let's say, go into regulation of a port. But since now we are here at the EU, and I think ports are a very important part of the total transport planning in countries and region. So that is the topic we have not been talking about until now, because all this is about also logistics. You know, when you plan to ship something, I would encourage use the ship. You know, honestly, look into the various transport modes, and look into the opportunities for shipping in the total logistical chain. Of course, some is global, but also some is short sea. And then when it comes to the responsibility of making ports efficient, which is extremely important for shipping, you know, have efficient port, meaning to have the cargo handling being undertaken efficiently without, it will also reduce emissions. That, of course, I think is not a topic for the global regulator, the IMO. I think that is within the national planning system, and you are doing it also in your EU cooperation, which is very, very good. Okay.
Isabel, should IMO regulate shipping? Ports, sorry,
What do
shipping
you
it does.
think? I don't think so. I always say
As I told
move.
you, I got the questions, so I passed the questions.
Ports cannot move, ships can move. Ships are in a global context, but ports are very much enshrined in a local, regional, national, European context. And we have Magda, we have DG Move who already regulates ports. So I think
yeah.
I just want to, I just inspired by the 3D printed autonomous electric vessel. I haven't seen that one, but would love to. But the point here is just that I think it's very important that whatever we do is flexible and allows innovation. So this thing about prescribing the specific fuels or anything, that would be toxic. The reality is there's a lot of uncertainty going on. A lot of people want to find the holy grail. What's the new heavy fuel oil that we can use for the next 100 years? And it's not there. Sorry to say, and all these debates about ammonia versus methanol versus methane versus, I think we're going to have to realize that for foreseeable future, there's going to be very different pathways, and for sure, batteries will enter the scene. We actually have a container ship in Norway, the Yara Birkeland. It's a very small one, but it's still, it's up there. We have Costco, they have some electric barges coming. So we should not pretend to think we can predict the future, because we never could. So my point here is just, it's very important that we have a framework that talks about the energy, the green energy, and not whether it comes in this form or in that form.
Just a very short additional remark on that. So I fully agree. There's going to be a mix of fuels, and actually I can underline that with data. What we've done in the RCF Alliance, we had one work stream that looked at all the shipping studies that are out there, public, non-public, from the class societies and so on. And then we tried to do a meta study out of that. Yeah? And basically we couldn't do it because the assumptions are so vastly different. So basically the best we could do is put them into buckets. Studies leaning more towards we stick with the conventional system versus, yeah, I believe there's enough bio feedstock, so I'm going to go bio, or renewable electricity is going to be really cheap, so we're going to go all electricity. And you find dozens of studies for each of those. Yeah, so even, let's say, that the desktop colleagues are not fully clear on the way ahead. So this is, I fully sign up to this.
Thank you so much. I have a number of questions here, some of them very specific and some of them even very EU specific, so maybe those I will park, but I'm happy to answer bilaterally or ask to answer. But just in case anybody wanted to raise a hand here. No, really? Yes. Yes, sorry.
Hi, I'm Emilie Espanet from New Energies Coalition and CME-CGM. I'm quite interested to know what is the impact of the recent joint declaration of the ship owner at the beginning of this COP. They have asked for an acceleration of the carbon mechanism pricing. Do you think Europe will react and will reinforce, because we know the current level of ETS tax is not sufficient to cover the levy of the fuel?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, my question is this joint declaration of the ship owner that they made just recently, beginning of this week, have changed the rules, and that will change the future regulation to accelerate the carbon mechanism pricing?
I think the declaration we had on Friday, it was, I think, is more than anything a full support to what the IMO is doing, and basically saying we as an industry will work together to conclude what do we think is the best way forward, what will it take for us as, cooking the food, to do it in the most effective way. That is how it should be seen. I think it's really an attempt to support the work that is coming over the next year to the maximum extent possible. We really want to use our energy to support that, as opposed to discussing with each other whether that fuel or this fuel or and so on. So that's how it should be seen. So it's really lining up behind the IMO and saying how can we best help.
No more carbon pricing mechanism acceleration.
Oh, that's an important
because
part of it.
This is what they call for, in fact.
But we have the framework from the IMO that includes that, as well as a mandate. We are going to have, we need to agree, of course, I can only talk for myself. We expect actually to have a very clear recommendation saying, so from an industry perspective, from an operator, this is what we think could work really well, including some numbers, some illustrations on how we think it could work well, and then we can submit that, and that can be taken as input, and then let's see where it goes.
Now, just also to, for those who are not familiar with, let's say, how the IMO is, developing requirements, and I can provide you some examples. And of course, I think the majority of member states, they are, let's say, supporting carbon pricing, and some countries even have it in their own country, and EU has it in the EU region. So, fine. Now, but to give you some examples, the IMO has done quite many regulations on environment. Let's take, in order to prevent oil spills because of accidents, we have for oil tankers a double hull standard. That is very specific requirements, giving then construction requirements for ships in order to prevent spills with accidents. You could also say, okay, we try to achieve the same with imposing a fee on, let's say, single hull tankers, Would that have been leading to the same result? If the fee had been very high, perhaps. But the point is, it's easier for member states to work, let's say, with technical requirements because the issue of money floating, coming in and out in a totally global context is a little bit more complex. Nothing wrong with it, but it's a little bit more complex. Therefore, you know, the regime at the IMO is very much defining what type of equipment, what type of construction, what type of safety procedure and crewing requirements, etc. So just to explain for those who are not familiar with the IMO regulations.
I think that's a very valid point, because that was one important element in the discussions, that IMO is a technical organization, so it doesn't look into the things that it is actually looking now into. And I think that's the big change that happened. Of course, the carbon pricing mechanism is a tricky discussion for many reasons at the IMO level. I think it's tricky topic at any level and at any in any group of countries, but it's important to indeed, as you said, to have had this consensus that it is a measure on the table. Will it happen? What it will look like in the end remains to be seen. Yeah. We'll meet in 2025 and then we'll see.
But short comment, you know, what is technical and what is political? At the end, most of it's political.
But I mean, I know we've used that argument zillion of times, so I'm very happy to hear it repeated now. Now we have 7 minutes, and I was just thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Then the last question from you, and then my closing question to everybody, for which everybody will have 1 minute to respond.
Okay. Excellent discussion. My question is for all these ecosystems that you mentioned that are part of the port operations. Not only the shipping industry, but also the companies that are operating at the terminal. Which would be your message? I mean, should they wait and see if everything is clear? Should they start offering green products because there are already initiatives? I mean, the operations in the ports are not clear, are not yet there. Which would be your best recommendation for this ecosystem of companies apart from shipments? What should they be doing? I mean, what would be your recommendation?
I can try and give an answer to that. Well, ports do play a very, very important role. That's why we bunker the ships. And we are actually seeing the first ports who are actually leaning out on this. We have a Port of Gothenburg who wants to deliver green methanol. We have COSCO has said that they want to supply green methanol in Shanghai. Rotterdam is quite active also on that front. And I think quite a lot of ports see it actually as part of a competitive offering. That you can, some ports, the bunkering capabilities is actually a very important competitive offering from their side. Some of the big container ports, at least, that's what I know best. So I think, I guess it comes down to the individual port. What kind of role would they want to play? How do they define their competitive edge in the market? And then I don't think there will be a size that fits all. And also given that the volumes will need some time to ramp up, we don't need 200 ports around the world to begin with. We need to start with a good handful, and then certainly for the large ships, that can actually cover quite a lot. And we are actually seeing a lot of interest and a lot of leaning in from a lot of ports around the world. So I think just another example of an industry that's actually properly interested in doing something about this problem.
Maybe Isabel to answer on that question.
Yes, I think ports cannot wait. I mean, ports have to work on it, and they do work on it. But we have to have, we see quite some flexibility on the ship side. I mean, also in the legislation through the pooling, etc. And so for the ports, it's also important that they also have this flexibility to adapt to their customers, adapt to the role they can play. And it's like you said, not every port will be able to play the same role. And not every port should play the same role, because not every port have the same customers, etc. So this flexibility has to be there, enabled by the legislation, but ports cannot wait. I mean, there is no time to waste, but there is also no money to waste. So that is, I think, the two things we have to find a good balance with it.
Thank you. Okay, there are 4 minutes left. And five speakers. Let's see how it goes. There's a Slido going on where those who follow Slido are asked to say with one word what are the most important takeaways for you from this debate. Please feel free to respond. That's a Slido, voila. But I have one question to all of you. We are 2023 now. Just imagine that we are meeting in exactly the same panel in 2030. What will we be talking about when it comes to decarbonization of the maritime ecosystem? And you have, Sveinung seems completely at ease, so you'll be the first one to answer because I'm sure you have the reply. The same question to all of you, 1 minute. 2030.
Yeah, okay. What we will be talking about will be how to move from the first 10% of the fleet, which is now operating in low and zero emissions, to the remaining 90%. Okay? Because I think we will then have 10%.
So basically you're saying 2030 we will be at 10%.
Well, we are striving for that in the IMO strategy, so, you know.
That's I'm asking whether we will be at 10%. Okay. Alexander?
I would assume, or I would hope, that we are discussing practicalities like where do we get all the yard slots from for all the retrofits? So not the new builds, but all the retrofits turning into something green because the fuel is already there. Yeah, so we're not discussing supply chain anymore. And maybe, So I'll just leave it at that.
I think, and I certainly hope, but I think that we will be talking about how 2024 was the year where this industry really stepped up. Everybody stood united to solve the biggest problem of our time, and that we also inspired others hard-to-abate industries to do the same. So I think it'll be a really good night we will have. We will have deserved a good dinner, but I definitely think we will talk back about 2023 and 4 as a historic turning point in the fight against climate change.
Thank you. Isabel?
I hope that we can talk about not anymore as maritime as being a sector that is difficult to decarbonize, and so that we are over that, beyond that, and that we can also talk as ports as enablers and as part of the solution, also towards, because ports are not only facilitating the greening of shipping, but the greening of the economy, of society, and that we are a positive solution also towards the city communities and so on. So, I hope.
And Afke, you started, you round up.
Yes, the final words for me. So in 2030, I hope, I said, there's a win-win with the levy and the global fuel standard. So I hope they are there. And we didn't talk about monitoring, but I also hope it's crucial to have global standards so we can really compare and enforce when necessary. So I hope they all be there. And then I completely agree with you. I hope the sustainable shipping sector is there. I mean, I know ships, they take a long time, they have a long lifetime, but let's move forward and together.
Thank you. That's a perfect summary of this panel. Thank you so much. Join me in thanking the panel. And with that, we break now for a lunch, and we are back here at 2 o'clock, 2:30? 2:30 for the part on aviation. Thank you.